Daniel Badillo podcast.
Welcome to the Forged by Design podcast. This is your host, Daniel Badillo. Thank you so much for all your support. You can always find us through Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and of course, our YouTube channel, Forged by Design. Today is a great day to talk about loneliness in leadership. We have the privilege of having an instructor of psychological sciences from Augusta State University. He specializes in individual and group therapy, trauma, anxiety, and depression. So without further ado, it's an honor to present Yamil Santana. How are you, sir?
I'm doing good. Thank you for having me.
It's always an amazing pleasure to know of your history, to know that the great things that are happening, not only in the educational realm, that world that you live in, but also in your personal endeavors. I'm so proud of you. I really am so proud of you. So thank you for making the time. He said that he just came from work.
So, I sure did.
So after a cup of coffee and a Bustelo, I think we are able to do this.
Ya tú sabes.
Yeah, ya tú sabes. We will probably end up speaking Spanish along the way. The importance of loneliness in leadership is such a paramount and pinnacle topic nowadays because people are suffering in their loneliness in their leadership roles. And I'm glad that I brought you in because who else but a subject matter expert that can take us through and navigate through the psychology of loneliness. How can we start speaking about the topic of loneliness?
Sure thing. So, Danny, I always like to start by first defining, what we're talking about here. In this case, will be loneliness. Loneliness is an emotional state where a person finds themselves in some type of distress because there's a disconnection between the connection that they want and the type of connections that they have, socially speaking, right?
Sure.
So, meaning that they wish they had more people around them, and they wish that those connections were more, I guess I should say, genuine, deeper, rich. But in reality, they lack that. So that's how loneliness starts. I also like to say that it is important to talk about loneliness and other emotional health components because, one, they affect all of us.
Sure.
Everyone, will experience loneliness in some
degree or form. And I think I'll be the first one to raise my hand that I've journeyed through those valleys of loneliness.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So it's a theme that applies, I think, to everyone, including leaders, even more so, I would say leaders, because leadership, when someone's in that position of leadership, they are very vulnerable to loneliness. That being said, is something that often is not talked about because I know you were saying at the beginning, it's a good day to talk about loneliness, but a lot of people may disagree.
I didn't think about that, but I was saying it in the perspective that we're going to provide a tool sets to come out of loneliness.
Absolutely,
correct. I stand corrected.
No, but I think the reason I say that is because a lot of times when it comes to themes like this, like loneliness, like I also do a lot of trainings on suicide prevention, and anytime you mention like these terms, loneliness, depression, suicide, anxiety, people look at you and they're like, make it brief, like we got to go on or change the subject, right? Because it brings me down to like just think about like the this topic, this area, right? But just because it makes us sometimes, feel a little uncomfortable talking about these things, that does not mean that it's not important to talk about.
Statistically speaking, do you see that there's an increase in people that are approaching the psychological assistance, psychological help, therapy, back in the 80s or 90s? Do you see it increasing or has it plateaued? Because I would say that if I were suffering from loneliness and I need professional help, I think the stigma of being ridiculed, of being
Yes.
isolated. Look at him; he's got issues about loneliness and all that. Do you see that people are more now opened to receiving therapy than back in the day?
I believe so.
Okay.
I think back to my experience as a therapist at Augusta University, and when I was a counselor there, even the years I was there, I think we were seeing an increase in students coming to the counseling center, looking for help, looking for support. So. I think that's a small, sample when it comes right to the entire population, but I think it's on par with the trend that we're seeing. Like more people are coming and seeking support. I think also generationally speaking, the younger generations are feeling more comfortable with the idea of therapy. If you get on social media, you will notice that it feels like so many people now speak what we call like therapist lingo.
The mental health lingo and so forth.
Absolutely.
I think our fathers or grandfathers, maybe the older generation, they would counsel us to toughen it up, to deal with it as a man, to tackle the issues. And if you showed any sign of vulnerability, if you showed any signs that you were letting your guard down, you may be portrayed as someone weak-minded, maybe someone that has strayed from a certain goal, a certain path. But even in my younger days, where I was in of course in leadership positions, I myself said, well, maybe I need to speak to someone regarding this issue of feeling isolated. As I grew up the corporate ladder, you feel lonelier because of goals and aspirations. But I felt that maybe society or my social circle were more antagonistic about the subject matter.
Yes. I think the experience that you had, Danny, is very
common,
comparable. Yeah, it's common. Okay. It's still today the stigma of talking about these things exists, which is why I was saying, a moment ago that it feels like it's never a good day, to talk about it, because it's still, that there's still a lot of conflicting beliefs about like what you should talk about, what you should pay attention to, and as you know, sometimes people think like, oh, if you're talking too much about that, thinking too much about that, aren't you like creating that or making that a bigger issue than what it is, right? And which is not true at all. Just talking about something does not necessarily make that a bigger issue.
Correct.
Talking about something and addressing something is how you fix it.
I think, when people bottle up their emotions or bottle up the fact that they are feeling lonely to a degree, regardless of the factors that are creating those thoughts and emotions of loneliness, if they are unable to, I think we were talking about earlier, to really talk to someone or seek help, whether it be therapy or someone that they can confide in, that compounding effect is what makes people snap. Where we feel that we were talking about that people go to work with a smile, and you assume that they are okay. People are really good on fulfilling their roles and responsibilities, so I assume that they are okay. They're able to mechanically, maybe functionally, societally, maybe in faith, go through the motions of fulfilling their roles and responsibility, but internally they're suffering. How have you had cases like that where someone approaches you and says, everybody that you will talk to will tell you that I am stable, I am okay, but I'm here for counseling?
Yes. I think actually that happens more than maybe you think, because I think we in some way, shape, or form, we all perform. We all take on different roles during the day. It's very likely that you're not the same at home than you are when you're at work, when you are managing people, when you're with friends. In different circles, you'll put on a different type of performance.
Personality.
Yes. A different personality, different vibe, different energy.
Sure.
And that's okay. That's not necessarily abnormal. But what sometimes can happen when you combine that with social expectations, cultural nuance, all these things, is that in there you become vulnerable to hiding things. Because you get on this, at work, I am supposed to be always performing well. I am supposed, as a leader, you might say, I am supposed to lead by example, and the example is excellence. I want to see excellence, in my organization. So I should always look like I am having a great day.
So like an avatar. And you know what? I have to confess that I've been there. I have been there many times where, everyone goes through personal issues, whether it be marital, financial, whatever the issues may be, and then you show up to a place where performance is king. You have to meet certain expectations, certain goals. So as I navigate that, not to say that people are being hypocritical, but work is not a place where you show emotions.
Right.
Would you agree to an extent?
Yeah.
I don't go to work to find someone a shoulder to cry on or somebody to embrace. I come to work. To work and then go home, right? To go home
in some ways.
And same thing, we can apply that to go into a family member's home, a social gathering, a party, a professional business meeting, and even in a church environment. People go with a specific goal and objective, they fulfill it, but internally they're battling and struggling with this emotion of loneliness.
Yes, and that's where we start to talk about balance, because there is a balance to these things. You can go too much to one side where maybe now you're oversharing. You are in some ways putting some trauma onto the
somebody
people
else
that you lead, and you manage, or someone else. Even outside of leadership roles, this can happen. But sometimes you might do too much of the other, which is that you perform too much. You're putting on this idea that everything's good, everything's fine, even though that's not exactly true. That you are struggling, that you're having a hard time, that you feel very disconnected. Another way to think about loneliness is the idea of feeling unseen. So you don't feel seen for who you are and what you're experiencing right now. So if you think about it, if deep inside you're struggling, you're having a hard time, and nobody knows, that is the definition, right, of like not being seen, not being, acknowledged. Your experience, the only person that knows about it is you. Therefore, unseen, therefore lonely, right? But the reason that is important to talk about these things, to address them, is because at the end of the day, they are a health matter. A lot of people, when they think about emotions, feelings, it's like, that's one thing over here. My body and my health is over here. My leadership is over here. It's like all, and we approach these things like they're in silos.
Correct.
Right, separate, not together, not connected, and in reality, it's all one system. Especially the mind and the body is one.
Statistically speaking, culturally. I'm really don't have the information or the statistics to this. Do you feel that there's certain groups, maybe racial groups or societal groups, that suffer more from loneliness? Perhaps do people from South America suffer more from people from the United States or abroad or whatnot? Are there certain defining factors that can say that, because of maybe poverty levels, socioeconomic levels, educational levels, when you have these groups together, you have this stratification of groups that feel lonelier or maybe more reserved than maybe groups that are more extrovert or outgoing.
Yes, I think loneliness can vary across, different cultures. Like you have some cultures that are more collectivistic, for the most part, Hispanic, Latino culture, is very family oriented, community oriented. So it seems like you're always surrounded by people in everything you do. You have a birthday,
absolutely.
You got to have like everyone,
especially
come through,
us Hispanics. We have to make a festive festive about every, about everything.
You got to make a meal. You got to
Sure.
have everybody come and enjoy a meal together, right? And then you have other cultures that are a little bit more individualistic. Like they're more about if you got something going on, that's sort of for you, right? Whereas you have some cultures where like and I'll say this, I feel like I'm just gonna speak.
Sure.
I'm Puerto Rican, and Dominican, and if we have a family member that goes to the hospital, gets hospitalized,
we're all there.
We have a group chat, and everybody's, it's like,
it's not only that. It's not only your family goes there. Your friends of the family are also there. Yeah.
And if they go to church, now all the church members are showing up. It's this thing where, and growing up in that, my assumption was, everyone does this, and it's not true. Not everyone, there are families where it is more of a private thing, so you let the person who's recovering, be in the hospital, get better. They might even think that it's not polite to have a lot of people like show up and for us, you don't want them to be alone, not even like 1 hour. So it's like, oh, they're being alone for too long, you got to get someone in there. And so all of that to say that it depends too on your definition of what was good and what's not, right, based on what you grew up. Now, I'll tell you this, going back to leadership. In leadership, you will see that culture does play a role on how you experience loneliness. So we were just talking about like performance, for example, if you think about someone who is here in the United States and is a minority and has been climbing the ranks, I think it's no secret to say that person probably had to work very hard.
Correct.
To get to where they are.
Triple the effort.
Tripled, and I'm not gonna get into all of that, but let's just go with that, right? Like they had to work really hard to get to where they're at, maybe harder than other people, in that company. So once they find themselves in a leadership position, they can often feel like there's a lot of scrutiny. There's a lot of people watching. There's a lot of eyes. For example, for women in leadership, there's a lot of people, or there's this misconception, this thing that falls, that women are just too emotional. So in a leadership position, a woman might feel like I gotta watch my emotions, because they already believe this thing about me, right? So I can't prove him right, even though that's totally, false and it's just a stereotype. Now you're fighting that, and now you're lonely in a way because maybe you are feeling something, but out of concern that you're going to show too much emotion, you just suppress it.
Okay.
You keep it in.
When I was younger, and I've seen this in other people in leadership, whether it be in an ecclesiastic environment or professional environment, is that they conceal loneliness. One of the mechanisms of how they conceal loneliness is the preoccupation of many activities. I'm going to fill my calendar, my work agenda to the fullest. I'm going to have so many services. I'm going to be in so many events, social events. Not only you have work events, you have social events, you have church events, you have society events. If I'm going to preoccupy myself so I can numb that sentiment of loneliness. And as long as I'm occupied, out of sight, out of mind, right? So we present an avatar, right? You think that they are extroverts and they're serving others and they're serving in society and they're being good professionals and all that, but all that to conceal the symptom of loneliness. And I've always wondered, what made that person snap? What made that person go from a really high to a really clinical depression, go into alcoholism, maybe live a very wild lifestyle when that they were timid, they were introverts, they seemed stable, and suddenly the before and after is very evident because they were unable to address the pain of loneliness. So what are other mechanisms maybe people use to disguise loneliness?
Yes, I think one is what you were saying. You can fill your time and stay distracted because what we know about like emotions, especially unwanted emotions, maybe unwanted thoughts, is that they often are most intense when you're by yourself. So usually, like when you think about anxiety, maybe even some depressive, thoughts, people that come to therapy usually tell me like, Yamil, this is happening when I go to bed, and like I can't sleep because all I'm thinking about is I messed up, I embarrassed myself, and I'm just replaying back, everything that I did wrong.
Well, you see, this, it seems like a script in my life, sometimes after again in my younger days, and just it happens, every blue moon. After a conference, you would feel, wait a minute, I just had a successful conference.
Yeah.
Why am I? When the lights go out and people go home and you're left by yourself, even here in this studio, and you're looking, your mind wanders. These emotions tend to surge, and I tend to. I like to be strategic with my thoughts, right? I like to be, even with my words, the power of life and death is in the power of the tongue, right? And try to mitigate and say, okay, I'm feeling lonely. Why am I feeling lonely? What are the criteria that made me feel? So I go through this exercise, but at the end of the day, I would feel sometimes ill-equipped to not only try to solve my issue by myself, but also sometimes ill-equipped to counsel others. How do you go about addressing when someone does open their life to you? And regardless if they're a CEO, a pastor, a professional, entrepreneur, an artist, author, regardless of the title, they come to you for counsel, and they really start to peel the onion, for lack of better words, and says, Yamil, this is who I am. This is what I'm feeling. I'm at a loss. I'm about to hit a brick wall. What is your approach?
Yes. So I'm peeling back the curtain a little bit here, but one of the things that you talk about when training to be a psychotherapist is that you're not in the business of telling people what to do. Right. And that you are not a fixer of problems, because that's sometimes an expectation that therapists can put on themselves, that somebody comes to you and they're at a low, and they come to you at a low. So they're like, fix me,
right, so their expectation is that, once they have a session or two, or how many sessions, that you will be able to turn their lives around. That's not the case.
And it's not that, what ends up making therapy work. They've done so many different studies, because there's so many different approaches to even therapy itself. Like you got cognitive behavioral therapy, acceptance and commitment, therapy. You have like the whole alphabet. CBT, DBT, ACT, like all these different.
There's a lot of acronyms. That's too many acronyms for me to remember.
But hundreds of techniques, hundreds of different approaches, and the one thing that shows up time and time again in research that leads to improvement, and that clients and patients, point towards, was the relationship that they had with the therapist. They say like, that helped, that relationship. So my role really when it comes to therapy is on building that, building a connection. And
do you see people that because not everybody is open to go to a therapist. Maybe not everybody from lower socioeconomic background is able. They think, of course, there's a cost to a therapist. If there's 20 sessions, right? If they say, hey, you got too many skeletons in the closet, too many background noise, you got a lot of baggage, a lot of trauma, depending on the situation. For those people that are unable to afford a therapist, them going to an incorrect source for counsel can actually counteract and actually damage even more their state of loneliness, I would assume.
Yes. I mean, this is true with any self-treatment. that you do, right? It's like for again, if we go back to the idea of health, so if you have a heart condition and you tell yourself, I don't know about going to the doctor for this, so I'm gonna like look at all these different things. Sure. And it's like, sometimes you know what, you find something that really seems to kind of like turn it on and work for you, but oftentimes you're taking a risk when you're saying like, I'm gonna self-treat, I'm gonna do this thing, and
Hispanics, we put Vicks on everything.
Right? You bet.
You know what I mean? Vicks under your feet, Vicks on your forehead, your chest. I mean, Vicks is not fix it all, and it does not solve any emotional or any headache issue. How do you start dealing with a person that says, I'm lonely? What are some of the basic steps toward finding and diving deep into the emotion of loneliness in this individual?
Yes. Well, the first thing is highlighting what's already been done, which is naming it. Like that's a huge step, because most people don't take that step to begin with.
When you mean naming it, saying like, I am lonely?
Yeah. Saying it just like that, being able to say that yourself and say, I am lonely. And then you're gonna ask me. That's a really powerful thing to say, and a lot of people they struggle, with that, because when you perform for other people, in a way you perform for yourself as well. Like you can start to believe the lie, that everything's fine. So this is true with other, mental health concerns. Like you got addiction, right? Like a lot of times they tell you, right? Like the first step is to recognize that you have a problem, right? So same thing with loneliness, right? Like the same strategy. The first thing that we have to do is name it and recognize that it's happening. So I am lonely. That's huge. That already is a lot of the work. The second thing is to start doing what you have not been able to do, and whether it is in your leadership position or just at home life, right? And that is to give space to that feeling. A lot of times we don't give space to our feelings, right? Because we have this almost like defense reflex, when every time we feel like yucky or we feel like this is not like a good emotion, first thing we do is shut it down. Immediately, try to make ourselves feel good. So, like you were saying, that might look like someone filling their time. That might look like somebody, grabbing a snack and being like, I'm just going to eat, like I need to feel better. Or I go and do an activity or something to like, but it's always this approach of like, let me get rid of this thing, right?
To numb it, to
suppress it, right?
So the occupation of preoccupation. I'm going to get, seriously, I'm going to get so busy in my agenda. And even, I always say, I like to plan my day, plan my week. I'm a project manager. I do a lot of other things professionally. But one of the strategies that, for better or worse, in planning is that if I wanted to suppress my loneliness, I just get occupied. I'm going to fill my month or with so many things that I have to do, simply because it's a scapegoat. Those activities are a scapegoat of not wanting to confront or admit my loneliness. Yes.
Being still is a skill. Like
being still is a skill. Yes. I'll put that on the t-shirt. That's awesome.
So a lot of times, what I say about therapy is that sometimes even just taking the time to sit down and going into a new space with an emotion, that in and of itself is an intervention, right? Because when you're go, when you're like doing all these things all the time, you don't let yourself process, what you're thinking, what you're feeling. So sometimes even just pausing for a second and telling yourself like, I'm lonely, right? And talking to, let's say in this case, we're talking about therapy, talking to a therapist and sharing that, maybe having, some feedback and understanding about like, okay, what was maybe triggering some of that for you, right? That space, that intention to want to understand more, that curiosity, that in and of itself is very, very helpful. Because that's the second thing I would say. The first thing would be name it. The second thing I would say is get curious about it. In therapy, I want to ask more questions than make statements. So
from a therapist standpoint,
from
you
a
ask,
therapist, I'm going to ask you a lot of questions.
No judgment, no nothing,
judgment. No, no. I want us to be inquisitive, and I want us to be curious in a non-judgmental way, because the more questions you ask, the more likely it is that you will learn something, that you will understand something. But if we get too, stuck on like, hey, this thing is bad, make it go away, right now, then we shut ourselves up. We put ourselves in a position where there might be something deeper that would be good, but we're treating like a symptom, right? Sure. So it's like sometimes loneliness is not alone, as a concern, sure. Right? So it's one of those things where I, as a person, as a human, I totally understand that we don't want to, feel what we call like these negative, feelings, these negative emotions.
Is medication part of this? We have the therapy of the psychological portion of it, the Q&A, diving deep into the root cause of loneliness, assuming that, for example, just as an example, I've never been through foster care homes, 20 or 10 foster care homes. I've never been through this situation or that situation, but there's another individual that comes with a lot of journeys, a lot of stories, a lot of setbacks, a lot of letdowns. So you would have to dive even deeper with these individuals that come from these traumatic situations with anxiety, especially if they also have ailments or physical disabilities and approach you for loneliness. So there's the psychological portion of it. Is there also a medication portion of it, or is that not part of the portfolio?
Yeah, well, if we're talking about loneliness by itself, I would say there's probably not like you have to take this medication and it will make it, better, because in a lot of ways, behavioral change is important. So you cannot just put it on medication. Now, that being said, if someone as maybe a byproduct of their loneliness, they're now dealing with clinical depression, they're dealing with anxiety.
Correct, yes.
Medication is definitely on the table. We know from research that the best results come from a combination of psychotherapy and medication. And for any other health concern, you usually would think about medication, right? Again, like if you're thinking now you have things like hypertension, diabetes, right? Again, medication.
Byproducts of loneliness, clinical loneliness, and it leads to depression, which leads to other ailments.
Yeah, exactly, right? Like it's all connected, right? So and for all these things, you don't want to like if you're having the issue, the problem, like now we have hypertension, now we're dealing with clinical depression and all these things, is you want to treat all these things. You don't want to say like, well, I'm just lonely and that's, so I'm just going to treat this. And no, like as these things become issues, you do have to address them. And that may be, it will be a lot of behavioral changes. You have to make changes.
Yeah. Somebody, again, I'm not a psychologist or a psychiatrist. Somebody says I'm lonely. I guess from a friend standpoint, if I'm talking to a friend, I'm like, why are you lonely? You're surrounded by people. You have a good house. You have a good life. You have a good job. You're probably physically fit. You have charisma. You seem to be financially well. You have a great academic background.
Yes.
Help me a process of elimination as to what search. I mean, what's causing your loneliness?
I think
without being not to embarrass them or be insulting, but why are you lonely?
I think is because you care, and I think when we care for other people, we don't want to see them, struggle. Sure. So it comes from a place of I want to see you feel better, Now that being said, that's why sometimes is people tell me like, hey, Yamil, like, could instead of like therapy, could I just find like a really good friend, and then I'll do what you're saying, I'll talk about my feelings and all that.
So there's the therapists and there are also counselors that help you through your journey, So admit that you're lonely. One, name it. Second, you start to peel the root causes of this loneliness.
Curious.
Get curious. What is it about without judging? A lot of Q&A and so forth. You assess their background, whether it be the socioeconomic background, the life background, marital issues or family and so forth. And then what's the third or fourth step?
Sure. After that, so if we're talking again about leadership, after that we might be talking about compartmentalization.
Sure. Satisfying, compromise. Yeah.
As the day goes on, my language, gets shorter. But I think
different buckets, different strategies,
different buckets,
categorizations, classifications of things.
Yes. So, I think you were saying this, Danny. You were saying as a leader, I may not want to just share all my problems with everyone in my organization and my team. And that's definitely not my advice. I wouldn't say, hey, like the way to do it is like, now you got to tell them everything. That being said, though, you do still have to do something about the loneliness. Like you cannot just then perform for your team and then go home and not do anything, because it will follow you. So the third step is to make sure that you're taking action. It's so important. I was telling you earlier before we started the podcast that loneliness has been compared to smoking cigarettes when it comes to research. That we've learned that chronic loneliness in a person is about equivalent to a person smoking 15 cigarettes in a day.
15 cigarettes
in a day. That's the type of damage.
Is that a pack? I have no idea. I've never smoked.
It's a lot of cigarettes.
That's a lot of cigarettes.
Nobody should be.
That's 15 cigarettes.
Nobody should be smoking in general, right? Much less 15. But and of course that's not like a 1-to-1 comparison, but it's to give you the idea of how serious this is. A pack is 20. A pack is 20.
Thank you, producer.
Yeah. So about a pack a day, Thank you for that. And it's not good for you.
I felt like I was just fact checked. Thank you so much.
Yes. And you can see this, that there's that comparison. But the reason I'm telling you this, Danny, is because when you think about like working on these things, on these issues like loneliness, it's not something that should be optional. It's not something that should be supplemental to the personal work that you do. It's necessary because it's organizational risk. Like if you're leading a team and you're not taking care of this thing, it is going to leak and in some ways affect negatively the work that you do and your team members.
I'm wondering, now that you brought up that, whether maybe you can comment in the comment section or provide some advice, because many organizations, when we have health insurance, right? We talk about health, just, your blood pressure, your annual physical, whether or not they provide benefits for you to seek psychological counsel or therapy if there are other issues like loneliness. Would you say that people can use loneliness as a tool because they have an empathy or sympathy addiction?
That's a big one. I know where you're getting.
So I have this. I need the attention. I live and breathe and nurture on empathy and sympathy. That's my mechanism. And loneliness is how I approach Mr. Yamil. And woe is me, but when you start talking to the person, you don't have a loneliness issue. You have an addiction to empathy and sympathy. And loneliness is just the avatar to disguise your situation. Have you seen that in your sessions?
Well, it's how I like to say, two things can be true at the same time. It's like you can be lonely, and you can use people's sympathy and empathy,
Yes.
right? So a lot of times it's both, because it's like if you weren't truly lonely, then you don't get a lot from just sympathy and empathy,
Sure.
right? So a lot of times, there is still some loneliness component there. In therapy, for sure, we always approach things by believing the person, right? So if someone comes to me and they tell
You
me,
must believe that person.
I'm lonely, I believe you. So it's not, I'm not in the position of like, well, let me try to like ask you these questions to maybe say no, it's not that you have this issue, right? I mean, we do want to differentiate and rule out different diagnoses, but it never comes from a place of scrutiny or like wanting to no, that's not it, it's something else. But what I would say is, and you made me think about the idea of loneliness versus solitude, and how those two sometimes get confused. What's crazy? I was doing some research, preparing a presentation on loneliness, and I was trying to look for like the Spanish equivalent of these things, and I learned, even though Spanish is my first language, I learned that there's not like a different word for each one. So solitude and loneliness.
They put it as like a synonym,
They're the
antonyms.
same. Like we only have
synonym.
one word. Soledad. Right?
Oh, in Spanish. Oh, yeah.
In Spanish.
Yes,
so in Spanish, you don't have this word
Loneliness
for loneliness
and
this word for solitude.
Oh, yes, that's correct. I never thought about that.
So you just say me siento solo, or quiero estar solo, right?
Yeah, I'm alone. Yes.
Right. So and I learned that maybe the correct terminology is to say for solitude a solas, and then for loneliness solo or soledad.
Soledad.
Right. But it's so interesting that even in our culture, we have a hard time differentiating between the two. Like we don't have them as separate terms. We just see the soledad.
Yeah, that's very wow. You that we can unpack that, because
Yes,
I think for example, the book writing that I do, or any other presentation, I use, and I'm not sure if I'm saying this incorrectly. Correct me if I'm wrong. Sure. Whether I'm saying, for me, sometimes loneliness is a strategy, because I need to focus. There's goals, objectives, aspirations. I have to omit all the distractions around me. I need to focus on this end goal, this outcome.
Yeah.
And
so you choose to be.
I choose to be. Just again, it's a choice. Because I might be lonely intentionally as a strategy momentarily, but I know that I don't suffer from solitude. I know that a friend is a phone call away, a chat away, a text away, an email away, whatnot, a phone call. Not that I like to be alone, but there are moments where you have a strategy to my loneliness.
Yes.
So when you're counseling, you make that distinction. Are you alone, or you feel solitude?
So the difference between loneliness and solitude, because they're actually like very
intertwined.
Opposite. Oh, they're very opposite. That's why I was saying, like, I'm surprised that in Spanish we don't have two different words, because they're not the same thing at all. So loneliness is not by choice. If you're choosing to be by yourself, you're looking for solitude. Solitude is done intentionally, and solitude can help you recharge. Like if you are practicing solitude, you tend to come out of that feeling a little bit better, right?
So like meditation.
Yeah, like
a
prayer,
kung fu,
or like a
zing zang, whatever they do,
or like even just I want to go for a walk, and then you get up and you're not like, hey, everyone, can you come with me? You're like, I just want to do this by myself. That's solitude, because you're choosing that. The loneliness, the reason it's distressing is because you're not choosing, you feel unseen, and you don't pick to feel unseen. It's like it's happening, to you, right? So that's why they're opposites. So solitude is actually something that I encourage. I want you to seek solitude, because we all should have some time with our thoughts and ourself. We all should take some time to be with our thoughts.
I know of individuals that I just can't see them with their thoughts. No,
that's why I was saying, being still is a skill. Not everyone can do it or feels good about doing that.
I think there's an art to solitude.
Oh,
it's got to be okay.
100%.
It cannot be intentional. It's got to be. Non-intentional. It's got to be intentional.
Yeah, and you can look at monks, that do this, right, where they have to spend a lot of time like meditating with their thoughts, and then they'll tell you like it's not easy. A lot of people are not cut out to do that, so they go on these retreats and they find out, and they're like, I can't do that. Like that's actually work.
This day and age with cell phones and everybody with the cell phone, it's hard for people to intentionally be in solitude.
Because there's also this is a different type of emotion, but it goes, sometimes it can go hand in hand with solitude, and that's boredom. Like it's good to be bored. It's good, but we hate that.
Don't give my producer any ideas.
Yeah,
please.
No, I something.
It's like your wife is gonna say, "What are you doing?" I'm here, literally in my therapeutic boredom. It's like, well, you need to paint this and you need to fix that.
Well, listen. Some of the greatest ideas happen because somebody got bored, and they just started like thinking creatively, right? So boredom is an emotion. Like too much of it, right, can be like too much of anything really can be bad, but boredom is still important. And a lot of times, like in our day and age, when you have easy access to content all the time, it's so hard sometimes to just let yourself be bored. Because the moment you feel like something doesn't have your attention, it's so easy to fix that. You just pick up your phone, and then now there's almost like this war for your attention when it comes to social media and stuff. Like everyone wants you to keep, scrolling, to have your eyes,
the algorithm.
Entertain you.
Yeah, those algorithms.
It's all about entertaining you, right? Because the moment you get bored, you close the app and you go somewhere else, right? So there's almost like this war against boredom. Like everyone wants, look over here, I got something for you. I got something to entertain you with.
That's very important, because we always try to fill in the gaps, and I myself am guilty of this. Again, when you're planning your day, whatnot, and I'm very diverse. Sometimes I'm writing, sometimes I'm composing, and when I get bored of writing, I'll do this, and when I get bored of this, I'm always trying to fill the gap. Of course, I've got my time of prayer, meditation, and so forth, but to your point, it's so true.
Yes.
And these algorithms, man, it's amazing. Whether it be TikTok or Instagram, whatnot, you click on something, and then other similar videos come with the same subject matter.
Right.
I'm a fan of CSI and every investigation.
And then you go down the rabbit hole of
45 minutes go by, and I'm like, in a blink.
You won't even realize that it's been 45 minutes. Like I, for anyone listening, I say this as a homework assignment. Like, go on your phone. You can see the time you spend on each app.
I don't want to do that.
No, do this. Put a timer on it, like for 1 hour. And you'll be surprised when you realize your timer keeps going off. Like you'll be like,
sure.
Oh, that was an hour.
Yeah.
It felt like 15 minutes,
right.
And you have to maybe like snooze, your timer.
I think I'm very good at controlling my face time, my monitor time, because as you see in my studio, I'm a reader. I like to read. It opens my thoughts. It gives creative ideas, witty inventions. So I'm a reader. In my garage, I have other racks of bookshelves of a lot of books. Different subject. I love psychology. I love the human thought and whatnot. So you have a loneliness, solitude, and of course another one is boredom.
Yeah.
So once the individual says, you go through these sessions of being alone, have you seen that there's an improvement and that people have been able to recuperate, snap out of, for lack of better terms, I'm not sure what the medical terminology or the terminology is, that they surge to find a newness. Maybe they go back to their happy state, or how does that look like from a clinical standpoint?
Yes. So there is improvement, and that's why we do the work, right? To see like a change in the person.
Is there a chart? I mean, how do you measure emotional improvement?
That's a good question. It's one of the tricky parts of our work because, and I'm gonna try not to get too sidetracked on this, but like health insurance companies, a lot of times they want us to have like a lot of metrics, right? So they want to give you a form and they want you to rate, your emotions. So they're like, from 1 to 5, how lonely are you? And it's one of those things where it's like, are you asking me like right now, this very moment, or like for like an average, or like the whole week? And it's so hard. But these companies, they insist on, like, they want statistics, right? So they want to be able to look at data and be like,
well, I'm a data guy, so I don't blame them.
No, and it makes sense. It makes sense. And to be honest, like me as a therapist, like I would love to be able to just look at a chart and be like, oh, that's the work we've been doing. There
you came in as a 2, now you're at a 10. Job done.
So, but the thing is, it's so hard to put these things in numbers, right? That being said, we try. We really try. And now, when the way we measure progress is dependent on the person. Everyone's different, right? So one of the things we do in therapy is we want to talk about goals. We want to talk about, okay, what do you want to see more in your life? What is it that you're wanting to see more? When our work is done, let's say, how would you know we made it? Like, what would you want to be seen during your day, during your life?
And that the patient will define that.
Yeah, I'm like, walk me through that. And we can do even some imagination exercises. We have something we call like the miracle question, which is, I'll ask you, you don't know this about me, but I actually can just make everything better for everyone. So, but you don't know this about me. But when you leave here today, you leave, and you don't not see him anymore, I'm going to snap my fingers and I'm going to get rid of your problems. How would you know it happened? Like, what's the first thing that you would notice that will let you know, like, Yamil did something, something happened. What's the first thing you'll see that will like tell you like, oh, something shifted, right? At times, the first thing
is it placebo therapy? I mean, you gave some.
Well, when you think about that, you start to then realize what it is that you want to see change, right? So a lot of times people may have a hard time answering that question of like, well, what is it that I'm trying to change? What is it that I define as feeling better? Because your definition of happiness can be very different than my definition of what a happy day looks like. Because some person might say, for me, I know I'm happy when I'm running a marathon, right? For me, that sounds I don't want to be doing that, right now. But for that person, that's a goal, right? So they're like, I knew I was like myself and I was feeling good when I was doing these things. So I'm like, oh, okay. So you want to see yourself, more active. You want to see yourself more present,
and have you become more active?
After so we'll track that. Because I rely on the person, right? On their report of how they're doing, right? So
if I were to have, like, for example, if physically or biologically speaking, I need a surgery. I'm going through an ailment and I need a surgery. I have the appointment. I meet with the surgeon. He does the operation. We get the medication. There's some certain therapists or therapy. Then we go back to do some clinical blood examination, and they know that I have recuperated because all my vital signals are normal. My blood pressure, this and that. The surgery has healed well. The stitches are gone. So that's their indication that everything went as planned.
Yes.
In therapy for loneliness, you say, okay, we've gone through 10 sessions of therapy. We have dissect. We have unpacked. You as a patient have defined what's happiness for you. You feel that you have reached that level where you're content and you don't feel alone anymore. Is that somewhere in that realm? Or
Yeah. So I will say, yes, for the most part, we have what we call behavioral health vitals, so just like you were saying, like you have like these vitals that you look at, like see how your blood pressure is doing, like, oh, okay, the medication's working, your blood pressure's down. How would you do that, in counseling? Like, what's the equivalent of being able to like see something and be like, it's working, it's
because
happening.
we're talking about emotions here.
Yeah,
we're talking about
and because of that, in and of itself is somewhat subjective to each person, right? What progress looks like. But what I was gonna say is, typically speaking, in therapy, a lot of times, and again, I'm peeling back the curtain a little bit here, but a lot of times we don't track things by how they're not happening, right? Because, for example, if I tell you don't think of an elephant,
I'm gonna think about an elephant.
You're thinking about that elephant, right? And like if I keep telling you like don't think about it, don't you dare, Danny, think about the elephant. The more I say that, the more you're gonna keep thinking about that elephant, right? So the same thing, like if I tell someone like, hey, just don't feel anxious, like don't have anxious thoughts, like don't think about that thing, like just don't worry about it. Like the more I say that, the more I build this pressure to not have those thoughts, which in and of itself creates those thoughts, right? So if I tell you track down your anxiety, right? Like I want you to just track how much you're feeling. By just making you think about that all day, I may make you anxious as a byproduct, because now you're looking at your anxiety and you're like, trying to keep track of like how intense it is, how it comes, how it goes. So a lot of times in counseling, we don't want what we call dead man's goals, which is like if a dead person can do it better than you, you don't want that to be your goal, right? So
that makes a lot of sense.
Yeah. So if someone who's deceased can do it better than you, then that's probably not going to be a great goal. So for example, like if you tell yourself, I just don't want to feel lonely, right? Like, and that's your goal. Like, I just don't want to feel lonely. We don't want that to be the anchor to our work, because guess what? The moment you realize you are no longer feeling alone, it's probably going to be the moment you think about loneliness again, and then it creeps in. It just has a way. It's not anybody's fault. That's just how the mind works. Like, so when you think about something, you tend to feel that thing. It
magnifies, it amplifies, and so
absolutely,
forth. Yeah. I had a question that I wanted to ask you, because there are a lot of people, family members, and just people in general in the faith realm, that if you go to a therapist that you're negating faith, why are you alone? And so many people, regardless of your denomination, of your belief, would feel that if I go to a therapist, that I'm going against probably my creed, my belief, my ethical or core values, and they negate themselves the possibility of getting the help that they need.
Yeah.
I always say that not everything is well, this is the controversy. Maybe if you want to comment how you deal with this, but if I were to say to you, not everything is spiritual. If I have an ailment, it's not a spiritual ailment. I have to go to a doctor to get checked, and there's medications, and I get better, and had nothing to do with my faith or so. That's the controversy, where I feel maybe there could be a small percentage, would it be? I don't want to put a number, 5, 10, 15%, maybe globally, that people will say, you know what, because of my faith, if I go to a therapist, then I would feel that I don't have sufficient faith in God or in the Bible or whatever denomination that you may be.
Yeah.
Do you come across individuals that says, I'm never going to go to Yamil because I'm a Christian, or I'm this, or I'm that, and I believe that I'm never lonely. You know what I mean.
Yes,
How do you what would be your response to those individuals from a mature, a professional standpoint? How would you address that question?
This is why I enjoy like doing these things like podcasts, presentations, because oftentimes in therapy, if that's happening, what you're saying, I won't see them, right? Because they won't come talk to me. So then I cannot say what I'm about to say, right? Which is what I want them, to hear. So if they're listening, this is important.
Listen and jot down wherever minutes we have.
Yes,
but
please. There's a couple of misconceptions, right, about seeking help. Overall, though, I think it's important for us to understand that just at the core, just being a human, whatever your faith, spiritual background is, I think all of them, for the most part, recognize that you're a human. You're a person, right? And just at that level, we know that we are social beings. Even evolutionarily speaking, the people who got to live the longest were the people who found a community. If you were in the forest by yourself, odds were not in your favor, right? So, evolutionarily speaking.
So there's healing in community.
There's healing in community. There's healing in bonding with others and connecting with others. And I was talking about how leaders, it's important for them to do this work because you don't want your employees to become your therapists, right? I think about it this way too. A lot of people, not a lot, I would say some people, they can think that, talking about my issues feels kind of selfish, I'm, having this person have to listen to all these things, all these thoughts, and it feels like very self-centered, but a lot of times, you taking that time to work on yourself, to recharge, to get some guidance, that is an investment. That is also a kind thing to do, not only for you, but a kind thing to do for other people. Because if you are doing better, guess what? That means your family's doing better. Your company has more of you, you're more present, you're more focused, you're more attentive, you're more emotive, right? All these things are so important. So think about it this way. You don't go to therapy just to work on you, but you go to therapy because if you're doing better, everyone else is going to be doing better too.
Your whole social circles, your friends, absolutely. And so forth. There's a saying that if you change the way you look at things, the things you look at change. And it's not a trickery of words, but it is so true that if you change your perspective about therapy, the receiving the session and the treatment of therapy is going to impact not only your mental health, your physical health, but also all the social circles that you are part of. I have a question here. It says, kind of to wrap it up, if a leader listening right now feels isolated and emotionally overwhelmed, what is the first step they should take to begin addressing the loneliness? And now that we have said, name it. Take me through this. Name it. Yes.
So first we're going to start by naming it. We have to recognize what's happening, right? Because if we don't put a word to it, then we don't take the step, right? Like you were saying, if you tell yourself I'm not feeling this, then step 2, step 3 are not going to happen, right? So we got to start first with naming it, recognizing it, right? The second step is to get curious about it. And this is even before therapy, start, asking yourself, why am I feeling
why
this
am
way?
I lonely?
Yeah,
correct.
How often is this happening? Is it happening more in one place?
Don't confuse it with solitude, which is strategic.
Right.
I'm lonely.
Absolutely, yes. And is it happening more at home? I'm home. I just feel, lonely at home. Leaders have this paradox that begins to happen that as you go higher up in ranks,
the more lonelier
you feel. But funny enough, the more surrounded you are by people, right? So it's like as you take on more responsibility, it means usually you are managing more and more people, right? But the more people you have around you, you would think that would mean the less lonely you feel. But a lot of times, the more people you have around you, the lonelier you feel. So it's a paradox, right?
That's amazing.
So what happens is, and leaders listening to this or people who are related to a leader, you can look into this, but you'll see that as someone goes up in rank, sometimes you think that they would be like invited to more social events, all of a sudden like the invitations thin out, like the employees are not inviting you to their like daughter's birthday, and because it's like
absolutely
now you're the boss, like
correct,
you're the, so
they're not as open, so
they're not as open.
You feel more
so
isolated.
now and it becomes like a mirror thing, right? Where like now maybe the people that work for you or part of your team, they all of a sudden like are performing like everything's fine. So then that confirms for you, I have to do this as well, right? Like I have to join the club of everything's fine. So it becomes this issue that the higher you are, the more vulnerable you will be to loneliness. So to go back to the steps, you got to name it, right? Mm-hmm. You got to recognize that it's happening.
So leaders, if you're listening in order to address the isolation and the emotional overwhelming, you have to name it.
Then you want to get curious about it, ask questions, and then you want to essentially what I call separate it into different parts, right?
Classifications, categorizations.
Yes. So what this means is that you have to do something about it, essentially, right? So you may not be able to fully express the full rainbow of emotions at work. That being said, it is important to model what you want to see, right? So that means sometimes you do have to be vulnerable, at work. And Danny, like if I were to ask you, I'm kind of putting you on the spot, but if I were to ask you, like, describe to me, the best boss you ever had, like what were the qualities that this person had?
Correct.
What would be some of the first qualities that naturally just come to you?
Well, naturally, disciplined, hardworking, caring, team player. Actually, the best bosses were not title oriented. They were always purpose oriented, and that they took me as a mentor. And learning from that it didn't matter if I had or did not have the corner office, if I had so many acronyms on my business card, whatnot. Mm-hmm. It was not about titles, positions, or acquisitions. It was about what are the values, what's the purpose, and those were my best bosses because titles aside, we have a culture to develop. Mm-hmm. And we have a function. Of course, we're in a profit, environment when it comes to business. But it was more about purpose-driven individuals.
Yes, I think, Danny, most people would agree with you with those qualities. That those are good qualities to have in a boss, in a manager, in a mentor. Right? Notice that you didn't say perfect. You didn't say have it all together. You didn't say emotionless, you didn't say any of those things. In fact, as you're thinking, of your probably like most powerful memories with these, people, they probably involved some type of emotion, whether it is encouragement, excitement, maybe even you might think of some of the challenges that happened and how you came together, and worked on it, right? So we don't evaluate good leadership by the absence of issues or problems, but good leadership is being able to address those effectively and productively, right? So it's not about, the person that comes to mind is the person that just seemed to have it all together. It was just perfect all the time. Perfect. Like that's not the word that came up for you. You thought about purpose. You thought about intention. You thought about discipline, hard work, right? So going back to loneliness, it just means that when you are at work, it is still okay to be vulnerable to an extent. You don't have to be perfect. You don't have to be emotionless. You don't have to be like this robot.
Sure.
And you really don't want to do that because it will follow you home. A lot of times leaders will find this, that they are having like these anxieties about work, but how can I tell my spouse? They wouldn't understand the stakes. They wouldn't get it.
Correct.
They would absolutely would just look at me.
Can you imagine going to your pastor and say, "I'm lonely"? Well, you're in a leadership role, but absolutely.
Yeah, but you have and you can look this up. Like there's so many people in influential, powerful positions, that they'll tell you that they struggle with this. So, I was not too long ago, Elon Musk, who is so rich, has access to so many resources. He was saying that one of his biggest struggles that he's ever had is loneliness. That's it actually
powerful statement,
that it almost killed him. And so you have one of the most perhaps influential
sure.
if you want to go by money, powerful people, right, in the world,
richest man in the world. Yes.
And I can tell you that Elon Musk is probably surrounded by a lot of people a lot of the time. I imagine that
if not half the world, this guy has so many tentacles in business that.
Yes. Now and I'm getting sidetracked here, but like I was, listening that time at that point is so valuable to these people who are billionaires, trillionaires, because even if they stop for 1 second to pick up something from the floor, that was $100, because that's how much they make a second, right? So it's like,
amazing.
So it's every minute.
Well, I desire that for everybody.
yeah, I know, right? But it's like every minute is filled with something. But going back, to everyone.
So the culmination of how so we unnamed it. We
got curious.
We stratified it, and then finally.
So find someone.
Find someone.
It doesn't just have to be go to therapy, although that's a really good place to start. But it can mean like, find a friend, find someone, that you can bring into your inner circle and you can be vulnerable with, right? Remember that loneliness is a byproduct of not feeling seen. So find a way for someone to see what you're feeling, to see what you're actually experiencing, right?
Powerful.
So
that's powerful.
It doesn't have to be, everyone in your company that sees you, but you got to find at least one person. Sometimes it starts with you. Like you're the first one that has to see it. You're the first one that has to see you for who you are, for how you're feeling. So I say that's the next step, see yourself and find someone that can also see you. And see you for who you are. That's the work, right? So it's not about getting rid of loneliness. It's not about making this emotion go away, but it's about adding, right?
Sure. Administrating, administrating.
Yes, and intervening is changing, right? So again, I would say name it. Get curious about it, categorize, find out like where can you go to recharge, to feel seen, and then let yourself do it, be vulnerable.
Wow, what an amazing nurturing of information with Structure Yamil Santana. We have been, I guess, just skimming the surface about all the things that can cause a loneliness. I tell you, as a speaker, as a friend, do not digress to alcoholism or any other addiction. Find someone to talk to. If you're a person of faith, consider also professional therapy. It's going to help you, your family, your health, all your social circles. There's so much help available for you. So there's no reason to be lonely. Find help. Find counsel and give yourself the best opportunity to live the best season of your life. I will see you in the next episode. Don't forget to subscribe to our YouTube channel. Put that notification button for the next episode through Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and you are going to have an amazing year ahead. I will see you then.